You're listening to episode 18 of the On Being Human podcast.
Welcome to the On Being Human podcast, where we believe transforming ourselves can positively transform society. Your host, Brandi Fleck, has the honor of exploring the human condition with real people who bravely share their personal stories of adversity, healing, joy, and more. If you're seeking empowerment, strength, and inspiration, listen in to engage and explore tough topics that help us humanize one another, understand ourselves better, spread love, and connect.
This week, it is an absolute privilege to be able to introduce you to my mother, Paula Flatt. In this episode, my mom, Paula, really opens up about what it was like being a teenage mother to me. She goes into how she felt pressure to find a father for me, which led to a young first marriage and early first divorce. She soon after met my late ex-stepfather and her late ex-husband in 1989. You'll want to hear Paula's perspective on the abuse and domestic violence incident that led to our abrupt move to Tennessee from South Carolina in 1998. I detailed this experience from my own perspective in episode 1 of this podcast, which you can find at onbeinghumanpodcast.com/episodes/001. Paula gives insight about why we stayed as long as we did, and we delve into what was potentially behind my late stepfather and her late ex-husband's propensity to abuse, including a disease process, alcoholism, and the inability to break a cycle he was in himself. Paula gets really honest and reflects about why she entered abusive relationships and how she searched for love her entire life. She also tells us what she prepared logistically to be able to leave the abusive situation and the support system that was in place that helped her succeed. Today, Paula is happily married to my current stepfather, a complete guardian angel to our family, along with me as her oldest daughter. Paula has my 23-year-old sister and my 11-year-old sister, plus a 1.5-year-old Havanese pup. She's been a registered nurse for just over 30 years. She started out working long shifts and being on call in hospitals. She's worked on open heart surgery teams as a home health nurse, an administrator for outpatient surgery centers, and now works at a gastroenterology center. So let's dive into Paula's journey. One of bravery and resilience, responsibility and lessons learned, and a journey that's just so special to me. Hi, Mom. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Hi, Brandi. Thanks for having me. I'm doing well.
It's a real privilege to have you here. Just the fact, that you're my mom, you've been through so much in life, you've accomplished so much in life, and I just think it's a real pleasure. So, it's no secret that I talked about my late stepfather, your late ex-husband, in episode 1 of this podcast. And I told the story of some of the abuse leading up to our abrupt move from South Carolina to Tennessee back in 1998. You've agreed to come on the show to talk about your perspective of those events. And just so you guys know, listeners, myself and my mother both think it's really important that you get both sides of the story. Unfortunately, you can't get my stepfather's side of the story since he passed away, but we're here to hopefully shed some light on these kinds of issues. So let's start from the beginning for listeners, though, to give a little context. Let's tell everybody, how old were you when you had me?
I was 17.
So what was it like being a teenage mother?
Well, it was a bit overwhelming, mostly overwhelming. It was lonely. Mm-hmm. It was humiliating because of the people around me. There was a big stigma on those things when I was 17, and I was a cliche that I never wanted to be.
Okay. So what do you know now as a mother that you wish you knew back then?
Well, hindsight is always better than foresight. I would have to say that I wish I had been more in the moment and enjoyed more more of the little special times that you and I had.
That's good to know. That's interesting. I think you really beat the odds. I mean, you finished high school, you went on to college, you became an extremely successful registered nurse. And I feel lucky because I was there for all of that. But what was that like? How did you stay motivated and find the time and energy to accomplish what you did while you were a young mother?
I had to be motivated strictly by sheer will and the grace of God, because it was very hard sometimes. I felt like I was all alone in the situation. I had this little baby I really didn't know how to take care of very well. Your needs basically to meet, plus my own self-care needs, and going to school and trying to support us. So I had to work, go to school, take care of you, and study. So I think sometimes study got a little pushed to the side.
Gotcha.
More than it should have.
Okay. Hey man, I remember sitting on your back playing with your hair while you were reading about bone cells.
I was just thinking about that when I answered your last question. I think you studied a lot more than I did sometimes.
That's funny. Okay.
At least you benefited from my studying.
Totally.
I so thought you were going to be a doctor or a nurse.
Did you ever consider putting me up for adoption?
No.
No. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. My grandmother, my mother, and my father all had this little, I guess, intervention meeting with me when they found out, after all of the yelling and the screaming, and I'm so ashamed, I'm so disappointed. After all that happened, they gave me choices.
Okay.
They said, abortion is off the table. And I said, of course, I never entertained that as an option. It's just not something in my DNA that I would ever do. The other option was to put you up for adoption, but they didn't like that option because they said they just couldn't bear the thought of a family member being with someone else. So they said if I chose the adoptive route, that they would adopt you, my parents would adopt you and raise you as my sister. So there were only two options, and I just didn't think that the second option would be any good, and I said, I did grown-up things. I should be responsible for the grown-up things that I did, and I should take care of and raise her, or raise this baby.
Okay. Well, I'm really glad you did.
Me too.
So now let's pivot into relationships and the abuse that occurred. So you were married once before you married the person that we'll refer to as your ex-husband, my late stepfather, your late ex-husband. Both your first and second marriages were abusive. Why do you think you entered into those relationships?
Nurses are nurturers by nature. I have always been a nurturer, sometimes to my detriment. And I love people. And I guess part of nurturing is wanting to fix broken things. So because I was looking for love, someone to accept me as I was, with the whole package, me and you.
How did your relationship begin with your late ex-husband?
I was introduced to him through a coworker friend that I had met shortly after we moved to South Carolina. I left West Virginia after I divorced my first husband because he was really messed up in the head, and I just felt we needed a clean start. So once we moved to South Carolina, where the family was living, mom, dad, brother, sister, I took a job there, and I met a very vibrant personality. My friend, she was a nice person. She just kind of took me under her wing, and she introduced me to your stepfather.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say it had to be about maybe a couple of months after I moved here. It was basically a blind date. She was dating his roommate.
Yeah.
And she said, I've got somebody I think you should meet.
And you had a lot of fun at first, didn't you?
I did.
I mean, it was awesome to begin with, right?
Right. He was a fun person.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, you know, I remember some really great things about my late stepdad, despite his flaws that we've talked about from time to time. Like, we always had an immaculate Christmas. The decorations won awards. We had amazing 4th of July fireworks displays. We had the best summer vacations at the beach. We had a beautiful yard. He really took pride in our home.
He did.
Yeah, and so do you think, from your own experience, that it's possible to be abusive and to also have good qualities?
Absolutely.
And do you think that because someone is abusive for a certain period in their lives, that they will always be an abuser?
I think that people have the potential, each person, to stop the abuse. It's just how badly has that affected them, and how badly do they want to stop.
Gotcha. Sort of like they have to know in the first place that they're even doing it.
Or accept in their own mind that this is abuse and this is I'm being abusive, whether it be verbal, physical, sexual. They all have to admit in their own mind, hey, I'm doing this and this isn't right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm doing this because someone did this to me.
Did what I hear you just say is that you believe that it's possible for any person to become abusive?
Yes.
Even good people?
Yes.
I agree.
Because children are innocent.
Mm-hmm.
If they're abused when they're young, they're new, they're fresh, and they learn behavior from the people they're around. So they're like this big sponge.
That makes sense, yeah. So, what are some of the good qualities you remember about your late ex-husband?
He was a funny person. He loved to laugh.
Mm-hmm.
I think he wanted to be proud of something that he had done in his life. And I think he was, very proud of the fact that he had a normal, quote unquote, family. And that he had an immaculate yard, and that he was a good neighbor by doing the fireworks displays. And I don't know, I think he cared about other people. Mm-hmm. I just think that he had a lot of his own issues to overcome. And to overcome those issues, you have to be a very strong personality. And I think that his health issues and his alcoholism both were strikes against him.
Mm-hmm. Alcoholism. Now that is something I really want to get into later in the show. And we'll have some other guests coming on who actually have experience administrating like Al-Anon and Nar-Anon groups and things like that. And so that's really interesting that you brought that up. But why do you think he became abusive?
Health issues, certain aspects of your health can dictate your personality, because some issues can change your personality, such as diabetes. Mm-hmm. If you have really highs and really lows, your personality changes based on how your blood sugar is operating on that day and how badly it's damaging your organs. And then if you have drugs, alcohol, smoking, all of those things in there, all of those things have a big effect on your personality. And as you age, all of those things become amplified. it can push you over the edge. You have to be very strong to overcome. You have to be faithful, and you have to realize that you have a problem. But alcohol and drugs cloud those issues, and so does health, things that affect your mind health-wise.
Gotcha. So it sounds like part of what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that your physical, mental, emotional health are all tied. They're all related.
Yes, very much so.
Okay. From the moment I called you, while you were and I detailed this in episode 1, you guys. The link for this will be in the show notes of this episode if you want to go back and listen to it. But I called you from you were at a Pampered Chef party up the street. And I called to let you know that my life was in danger, or at least it seemed like it was. So from the moment I called you to you taking me to a friend's house and then withdrawing me out of school and driving to Tennessee in separate cars when we left, can you describe the actual events you went through? What happened? What is the story from your perspective?
Oh, my. That's been so long ago.
Mm-hmm.
You also had a younger sister at that time who was 3?
Mm-hmm.
Was she 2 or 3?
She was 3.
She was 3. Just turned 3, I think, when all this stuff started happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I had her, and I had you, and I had work. Thankfully, I wasn't on call at that time, because I worked in a hospital, and we had to take call every so often for surgery.
Mm-hmm.
I had a very understanding boss who was just a godsend during that whole entire time. I had so much panic. I had to think of so many different things. I had to get you safe. I had to get your sister taken care of so that I could work and take care of some things personally, such as finances and things, and get my head together before I could do anything. And my late ex-husband was harassing me at the same time, so most of the time I was scared and I was angry and hurt.
So do you remember what you did to get things in order? Because this was all within a 24-hour time period where things went from seemingly normal to now we're going to pick up and just leave the state because we're in danger.
I think you said in episode 1, you talked about what he was doing and how we got out of the house. I dropped you off at the neighbor's house. And
yeah, where did you go? What did you do?
I believe, I know I had your sister. I don't know if I think I picked her up at daycare. I don't know where she was. I can't remember where she was when I dropped you off. I think he had her, and she was in the living room watching Elmo.
He did have her.
And he was in the garage. So when I told you to pack your things,
Mm-hmm.
we went downstairs. I grabbed her. I had no clothes or anything. I didn't have anything packed, and I didn't have anything for your sister.
Mm-hmm.
So dropped you off, talked to your friend's parents, and I went to a really good friend's house that wasn't far from ours I worked with. She was a scrub tech. And at the time, she was living with her mother, I believe, because she was having marital issues.
Okay.
So your sister and I spent the night there. I spent a long time, after your sister went to sleep, I spent a long time talking to my friend and her mother about what was going on. I had called our family in Tennessee. I got my brother and sister on the phone because Mom and Dad were out trucking Dad had his own trucking business, so
That's right.
Mom went on the road with Dad, and they were out having a good time traveling. So I talked to my sister and my brother late. It was late that night, probably about midnight, and told them everything that had happened. They asked me what I was going to do. I think it was over Memorial Day weekend, because I had a long weekend from work.
It would have been Labor Day because school had just started. Yeah, it was the fall because I had just started high school.
Sure, it was fall. I'm thinking it was the spring. Oh, well. It was over a holiday weekend.
Yeah.
So my brother said, we're coming to get you. You know, I'll call you as soon as we get there. We'll meet up. And I said, well, Brandi's going to school. I don't know. You didn't have a cell phone at the time or anything, right?
Oh, no. Cell phones, they weren't a thing.
Yeah, so it was all telephone, so you had no idea that my brother and my sister had talked.
Nope.
We were going to come get you out of school. My brother and my sister went to a hotel when they got there because they needed to sleep a little bit.
Mm-hmm. See, I thought you had gone to the hotel with them, but maybe I didn't know that.
They picked me up in the early morning,
Okay.
like the early morning hours. It was probably like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning at my friend's house.
Okay.
And then we went to the hotel with them to kind of collect our thoughts because I was up all night and they were too. So they had your sister. Mm-hmm. I was going to go over to school, get your records because you had to be put into school, and your sister had to be taken care of so that I could come back, work a notice. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of working a notice and take care of financial matters and things that I had to separate. You know, when you're married, things get all intertwined. Mm-hmm. In that 24-hour period, we checked you out of school. Mm-hmm. You had no idea. You were devastated. You were not happy with me. Your uncle took you. Mm-hmm. And he left. My sister had your little sister, and we had her daughter. Mm-hmm. So she was 5, and your sister was 3. So we had those two. And I had to talk to my boss. And I think I got a few things done, like cleaned out the savings account. Can't remember everything else I did, but I did a lot of things in that 24-hour period with no sleep.
No, and it was like logistical type stuff.
Yeah.
So if somebody was in a dangerous situation and they had to leave because they were afraid for their lives, what would you say is the most important thing to get taken care of if you can, and if you can safely do it?
You're vulnerable with your children. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want anything to happen to my children, so my first thought was safety for you two. Mm-hmm. Because he was pretty irate.
Yes.
And threatening to kill you. So he was just out there. So I had to get you safe. I had to get the other child safe. And then I had to talk to my boss. I had to think of everything that I needed to take care of. I'm a very organized person. So, and I was in charge of all the expenses, so I could take care of that at a later time. But I did get money before I left. And I did call, I think I did get some things for your sister too. I got back to the house because I called a neighbor and said, was he there? And they said no. So I got into the house, got a few things, talked to the neighbor, and she said she would help me. Mm-hmm. So I had the help of neighbors. I had the help of your friends' parents. I had the help of my family. Mm-hmm. And Mom and Dad. We got a hold of Mom and Dad and told them as well. So I had reinforcements. I had your all safety taken care of. So I talked to my boss about what was going on. I came back so that I could work a notice, and I stayed with my boss and my friends, and they kept me safe while that was going on.
Gotcha.
It is possible to do.
Yeah, for sure. We're living proof of that. Now, we were scared for my life, but at any point were you genuinely scared for your life?
No.
No?
No. But I didn't think he would hurt me. I wasn't going to let him. I'm a fighter. I'm not one of those people. I can be vengeful and I can be mean. And there are a lot of strong-willed, strong personality women in our family.
That's true.
And we're going to do or die sometimes. And I just wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid for me. And I figured if you all were safe, I was not vulnerable. I
Okay.
could do whatever I had to do.
Okay. And now that's not always the case in these
No.
relationships, but even though you weren't scared for your life, do you believe that you were abused?
Oh, yes. I was verbally abused almost on a daily basis and asked to choose between my child and him. It was a really bad situation a lot of times, especially if he was drinking.
Sure. People always seem to wonder why people in abusive relationships stay as long as they do. Can you answer that question?
Well, for me, we had built a life together. We had just built a house, that I'd always wanted in a really nice neighborhood. I had a great job. You were at a great school that I wanted you to be at. As far as I was concerned, we were at a point in our life where everything was kind of going our way. We were living the dream, so to speak. We both had good jobs. We had a nice house that we had just built. You had friends. You were liking your new school. I had your sister in a good daycare. We had excellent neighbors. It was just everything I had wanted for our family, And I didn't want to give that up.
Sure.
But I was forced.
Yeah. Was there a trade in your mind of, well, I can put up with the verbal assaults on a regular basis and the alcoholism because the rest of life is okay? Like, did it make up for it somehow, or how did you reconcile that?
It did. I figured as long as he was just abusive to me, I could deal with that. I could hold my own.
Mm-hmm.
But when he started becoming really abusive with you, I couldn't tolerate it. I don't know if you remember the time in the car that I told you I wished him dead.
I remember.
And you asked me why, but it was because of all the abuse. The abuse was becoming more and more and more. It hadn't gotten physical, but I'm sure that, as my nursing training has told me, people make threats, eventually they're going to carry through.
Mm-hmm.
And he had guns and stuff like that, So he could have.
Yeah. Why was it acceptable for you to have to go through that?
I don't know. I guess because I was living my dream and I didn't want to give it up. It was comfortable. It's very hard when you're married to somebody for a while. Everything is so intertwined and it's so hard to untwine it. And I never wanted to be divorced, let alone be divorced twice.
Right.
It was shameful to me. It was a personal failure in my mind if I couldn't make it work.
So you wanted to make it work. Your goal was to make it work.
Yes. And he was a good person. I knew he was a good person.
Mm-hmm.
But the more his disease process got a hold of him, along with the alcohol and the smoking and the drugs,
Mm-hmm.
it took him further and further away from us.
Right.
So the good times were less and less, and the bad times were more and more.
And really bad.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My life was a whole lot worse than it appeared. And
Yeah, nobody would have known.
no.
Would they have?
No, I kept that all to myself.
Mm-hmm.
The neighbors didn't know. I mean, everybody was shocked.
Yeah. It's funny how that happens.
My own parents weren't aware of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Mentioned things that I've heard other people mention that I've talked to who have been in an abusive relationship. Words like shame, shocked, people wouldn't have known. And because people wouldn't have known, because the person being abused feels shame and things like that, it can escalate really quickly and get really dangerous because people don't know to help. Is there anything that people on the outside can do? Are there red flags that they can look for, in your opinion, that say if the person who's feeling shame doesn't want to say anything or doesn't think that they can say anything, what would be something that somebody could look for to cue them in on the reality of the situation?
Well, when there's alcohol involved, you should really pay attention to relationships. You should pay attention to the interaction, because sometimes the interaction was rude and mean and spiteful in front of other people. It was very adversarial sometimes. Mm-hmm. But I would play it down and do what he was requesting, even though I didn't want to, just to keep it so that no one knew.
Just to be clear, though, you're not against having an alcoholic drink here and there, are you?
No, I'm casual social drinking is fine. 1, maybe 2 drinks. Every person needs to know their limit.
Gotcha. So you're talking about when there is an overabundance, when people have gone past their limit kind of situation.
Oh yeah, it alters your personality, your ability to think clearly. You recall we had a keg in our garage.
Yes, I do.
That was the beginning of the end.
Yes. As far as that relationship goes and sort of the abuse that you went through there, are you healed from it?
Think so. I forgave him a long time ago, before my grandmother died. I don't know how she came up with these words of wisdom, because she was usually a vindictive personality and she was an abuser herself. But she was very kind to me. She never abused me until I was older and a parent myself. She said, you're going to have to let that go. You're going to have to let that hatred go so that you can move on. And how she knew what was going on and how she gave me those words of wisdom, I don't know. But she knew I was holding on to it. It was a hatred. It was a deep-seated hatred by the time I finished with him. Something that was love and a good relationship, everything that we had built on, turned into just sheer hatred. And she knew it.
And that can be toxic.
Very.
For you, the person holding on to it.
Yeah.
How do you let go of something like that?
Well,
what does it mean to let it go? I mean, it's sort of like this intangible concept that we all talk about, but how would somebody even start?
Well, faith is one. You have to ask God to help you. You have to. I would have never made it through all of this stuff if I hadn't had God. I called upon Him so many times for strength and the ability to understand and to let go. And the only way I could let go of that was to ask God to help me. And He did. But it took my grandmother coming up with these words of wisdom that she'd never really given me before out of nowhere. So I'm sure that was divine intervention. And I forgave. And I just had to realize that it was not adding any quality to my life.
Sure.
To be vengeful and hateful and wishing someone dead.
Sure.
It was not me.
Right.
It was probably the worst side of me that he brought out.
Gotcha.
After so much torture.
It can feel like torture, for sure.
It'll eat you up inside.
I definitely have asked you a lot of questions over the years to sort of work through these things myself. Mm-hmm. And we've always had a pretty open dialogue about it. But one of the things that I had to understand in order to heal myself was, if you loved me so much, why was it so important to stay? I mean, because the abuse for me lasted for years. It wasn't just an overnight kind of thing. It escalated up until the point where my life was threatened and we left. And one of the ways that I've been able to reconcile that and be okay with everything is because I understand that it was hard, and that when you love somebody, you hope that the best of them comes back. And when there is alcoholism involved, that's a whole different story too. It's hard to make those decisions when you're in the thick of it. It's hard to see the forest for the trees, to use that cliche, but it is.
Yes.
And we've talked about it and we've worked through it. So if there were other parents and children who have been in similar situations and they feel hurt and resentment toward each other because they don't understand the other perspective, what advice would you have for them to start healing their relationship?
Talk about it. They have to communicate. The person that helped me with my relationship with you, because I think you resented me for everything that had happened, and then I resented you. I'm pretty sure those feelings were going on.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked through that before. But the person that helped me heal from that was my current spouse.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a special person.
He really is.
He was a godsend for you and for me for our relationship.
I agree. I agree.
He started the whole healing process, I would say. Because up to that point, we were pretty adversarial at times, you and I.
Mm-hmm. So what did he contribute to help you start that process?
I always felt that my life had to be put on hold for everybody else's. You know, someday when Brandi grows up, I'll get to do the things I want to do. Someday, if late ex-husband ever comes around, I'll get to do the things I want to do. There was always something that seemed to be in my way
Mm-hmm.
of doing the things that I wanted to do and the things that I wanted to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, if I can just make it through it, I'll be okay. But there was always something else that got in the way. He helped me see that if I just would be patient, that my day would come, and that everything I was experiencing, you had no control over.
Mm-hmm.
That you were a child.
Mm-hmm. And being a child yourself, when you had a child, maybe, would you say, caused those feelings, or that was why those feelings were there?
Yeah. Yeah. I had to give up a lot of things to keep you.
Mm-hmm.
And not knowing that, you know, I said I had to take care of you, not knowing exactly what that meant.
Right.
I had no idea of the impact of the things that I would be missing out on.
Mm-hmm.
Until I missed them.
Right.
The things that I made sure that you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
So he made me see that things would level out, and my life would be better, and I would get to do things that I wanted to do.
Sure. Was there a positive to keeping me?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Looking back on some of those times, you were a sweet little kid. You kept me focused. You made me laugh. You're a smart little girl. You always amazed me. And I knew you would do something good someday.
I love you, Mom.
I love you too, Brandi.
So let's end on a high note. We both came through this and have gone on to live happy, productive, meaningful lives. What is your life like today?
My life is pretty good. I only work 3 days a week at a outpatient surgery center. I don't take call, I don't do holidays, don't do weekends. It's probably a pretty cushy retirement job. So I still get to deal with the patient population that I like, but I have more home time. My current spouse is retired, so he has primary responsibility for our youngest, your other sister. So I'm still parenting at 53.
Well, listen, did you ever stop to think that maybe you were meant to be a mom? Maybe that was something special about you and your life, and that maybe you had to miss out on certain things that other people might get to do, but you were gaining something.
Maybe so. I impacted the lives of little people. I do. I think so. Maybe that was my calling. I always said I wanted to have 3 children and a husband and a house, and I wanted to travel. And I kind of have those things. I have 3 lovely daughters. Wonderful grandson. Thank you, Brandi.
You're welcome.
And life's pretty good. I get to travel. It's been fun. I have to say that life is good now.
So what do you love about your life?
Family. Family's very, very important.
Even if it's complicated?
Even if it's complicated, it's the best investment you can ever make.
And then something I ask every guest on the show is, what does being human mean to you?
That it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. We're all flawed. We're all going to make mistakes. But in the end, everything will be okay. You just have to have faith.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Be kind to others.
Yes. All right. Well, that wraps it up. So, Mom, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate you going through this.
It was a pleasure, Brandi. Helped me dig up a lot of dirt in my past. Things I probably needed to think about again.
You guys, I was so excited to have my mom on the show. Her story is one I know a lot of parents can relate to. The bravery, the persistence, and the sacrifice, even having to overcome judgment from others. Not only do I hope that you were inspired by my mom's sheer will to succeed at providing for her family, but her bravery to finally leave an abusive situation, probably one of her hardest decisions, leaving a life she worked so hard to build. For in-depth details about this episode, visit onbeinghuman.podcast.com/episodes/018. Leave a question, leave a comment, and remember to head over to iTunes to find us and leave a rating and review. This helps others find us and lets us know what you really need to help in your own journey of being human and transforming yourself from the inside out. Also, you can subscribe at iTunes and Apple Podcasts. Even find On Being Human with Brandi Fleck on Facebook. That's at On Being Human Podcast over on Facebook. I would absolutely love to hear from you. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Tune in weekly at onbeinghumanpodcast.com for more soul-exposing explorations of what it means to be human. Until next week, love to you all.